Welcome to the Iyer Achiever Expert Series with your host, Ram Iyer.
I ask people this rather simple question. There are about 8 billion people on the planet, whatever the right number is. I ask people, how many of these 8 billion people do you think are in business? The answer I get most often?
8 billion.
That's the correct answer, but most people think it's only the people who are business people, businessmen, businesswomen. And I tell people, anytime you exchange value, I do something of value for you and you do something of value in return for me, that's the definition of a business.
Absolutely.
The fact that you may pay me in dollars or Ram did this for me, I'm going to do something for him, or Ram did this, I'm going to do something in return as a barter, etc. There are 6 different ways you can do that. Is not, but everybody is in business, but for some reason people don't think about it that way.
Yeah.
And there's a negative stigma. Oh, Bill, you're in business? Oh my gosh, you must be gouging people and pillaging people. Like, everybody is in business.
That's right. We live in a society where you exchange goods.
Yeah.
So I agree. I violently agree with what you said, which goes back to the point why I believe everyone is entrepreneurial. And we just need to bring it out, cultivate it, bring it to another level. I mean, my mission in the world is to try to create more entrepreneurs who are better entrepreneurs and connect them together.
Well, when you look at somebody who's an entrepreneur, what is the measure of success? So you say Ed Roberts is a successful entrepreneur. How do you measure Ed's success?
So the fallacy to me is, how much money do you create? How much are you worth? I don't consider that a great entrepreneur. I shouldn't say that is not a useless measure. But it's not. I know a lot of people who've made a lot of money who I don't consider entrepreneurial. I think it has to do with impact. I believe you can be an entrepreneur in a large organization and an enormous success, not even be a founder of a company. Mm-hmm. Like, fragile, you change things around. I look at Satya at Microsoft. What an incredible job. This is one of the great entrepreneurs of our generation. I don't know if you followed that story. Mm-hmm. And he has turned it around. I think about Sanjay Sarma, an entrepreneur in academia, right? Mm-hmm. Think of all the people he's impacted.
Yeah. See, but one thing is, while money by itself is not the only measure of entrepreneurial success, people who fail to have what I call it reductionist thinking. Yeah. You need to be able to take whatever action you do and boil it down to dollars and cents, because otherwise, one, you don't have a customer, you don't have a viable customer, and most importantly, you don't have a viable enterprise, and therefore, it's meaningless to say I'm an entrepreneur because you're the head of nothing.
Yeah, no, exactly. Look, we live, if it's not sustainable, you can't have impact, right? A body without oxygen ceases to exist. A organization without cash ceases to exist.
Correct.
It will not do any good for anybody.
Correct, but that oxygen for a venture is money.
That's right, it's cash.
Yeah, many people end up starting ventures, and I call them hobbyists. Yeah. They just start one company after another company after another company. They have new business cards saying, Ram Iyer, CEO of the ABC company, and then it's the XYZ company, and then it's something else. It's like, Ram, what did you do? I was like, well, I started 5 companies.
Yeah, no, see, I just do not buy that. And when, to be perfectly honest, when someone comes up to me and says, I'm a founder of 14 companies, I'm like, well, that means you're not a great entrepreneur, because that's what you have. Look, it's very, very hard to create a scalable, great company. And it takes years to do that. And I think this is one of the challenges that today is everything's moving so fast that people think I only need to work at a company for 4 years and then I'm going to flip it.
Yeah.
It's a long time to build a great, iconic company.
Yeah.
One of my students, Freddie Karras, and this is, he started a company called Okta. it's like a 12-year overnight success. It's one of
Yeah.
the great success stories of our time. It's, I think, a $40 billion company now. But he had to think long term. He had to be committed. One of the great basketball minds of all time is Red Auerbach. His teams won in 13 years. They won 11 championships.
Yeah.
People are always saying, "Well, what's the key, Red? What's the key? You know, what is your offense? Tell us what's the key." He said, "A year is not a long time." He said, "Yeah, but what's the key? A year is not a long time." But I don't get it. Is this some sort of Zen thing? No, a year is not a long time. I think long term, and other people are thinking short term. Long term, and I say a year is not a long time. I will eventually win, and I'll win on a sustained basis. But if you're constantly reacting to other things, not thinking long term, you will not. In a world where you optimize systems to give the maximum financial leverage, we optimize them, we make them more predictable, we de-risk them. What do we do when we do that? We make them more fragile, because to do that, you have to assume that you know what the future is, and that they're not going to get hit by the exogenous force.
Yeah.
This model worked. When I grew up, this model worked. It's a command, control, and conquer model. It's Taylor time and motion study. It's just in time. So all these optimization, risk mitigation, assume that you know everything that's going to happen and you can predict that. When you do that, you can optimize the system and you can get better results. But what happens is when they get hit by an exogenous force, they break. And you saw this during COVID. Supply chains broke that were optimized. Companies that were financially leveraged to give their shareholders maximum return when they were going up, guess what? That knife cut even worse on the way down. The financial leverage that gave them better returns. So Six Sigma, another thing. A system, let's make it more predictable. What does Six Sigma do? When you have an exogenous force that hits it, when you have something like COVID, it breaks. And that creates fragility, and that's what we've been teaching people. Yeah. So people say, well, I don't want to be fragile. I am resilient. Well, I'm robust. Well, wait a second. If that's what you are, then you're just keep going straight. I'm going to ignore COVID-19 happened. I'm going to ignore these other things. I'm going to succeed no matter what. That's not anti-fragile. That's a neutral condition. You're just bulldogging going through it. I would argue that's not a great strategy.
Correct.
Anti-fragility says is that I acknowledge that things that are beyond my control are going to happen, things that I don't know, those black swans, as Nassim Taleb talks about. And when they do, I will embrace them. This is my time to shine. So while fragility is a negative condition, robust or resilient is the neutral condition. Anti-fragility is the positive condition where they get stronger in the face of change, adversity, of uncertainty. And that is a mindset, skill set, and way of operating that is, to me, completely correlated with entrepreneurship. In other words, mindset, when I know something's going to change, I see it as an opportunity, not as a bad thing. If this window closes, then there's got to be another window open. Let's get to it quickly. I have a skill set to do that, identify opportunities and act on. And the last thing is the way of operating is a community-based model as opposed to a command, control, and conquer model. So that's anti-fragility, why it's so important, and why we at MIT tie it so directly to entrepreneurship, because to me, it's one and the same.
Yeah, because I give people a rather simple example. I said, if I come and try to push you to the floor, you are rock solid, you're robust.
Yes.
But it still means that you're remaining in place, you're not moving anywhere.
Right.
2, I managed to push you to the floor, you're weak. 3, you managed to get up and get back to the position you were at, you're resilient.
Yes.
Okay? So now I come to try and push you one more time. But let's say your wife comes from the left, your son from the side, and Ed Roberts comes from behind. are you equipped? Are you capable of figuring out that these people are also trying to push you and how you might react?
Yeah.
In other words, do you get better irrespective of whether you have small setbacks or small successes?
Yeah.
Do you become more confident and more capable over time?
Yes, yes.
Only then do you become anti-fragile.
Yes, yes.
People think that getting back up, resilient, I'm great. But guess what? You just got back up, but you're going nowhere.
Yeah. The great ones in this, I just used an example the other day. Stephen Curry. I don't know if you follow basketball.
Golden State Warriors. Yeah.
Steph Curry had some of the worst ankle injuries people have ever seen.
All right.
And what did he do with the ankle injuries? He used this opportunity to work on his ball handling skills and his shooting. And he acknowledges to this day, there's a great article, if he hadn't, he wouldn't be the greatest shooter of all time.
So that was an opportunity for him to pivot.
Yeah, yeah. And he said, what am I going to do? Am I going to sit here and have a mindset that I whine about this? Am I just going to get back to where I was? No, I'm going to use this opportunity that I'm not able to play for 2 seasons to work on my ball handling and shooting to get back and be better. And it's interesting because, Biden embraced this anti-fragility theme when he said, we're not building it back, we're building it back better.
Very true.
So this concept is taking on, and when you think of the great basketball player of all time, Larry Bird, he was a great player in the second quarter and the third quarter. But when the game was on the line and people were getting hurt, he took it to another level. That's what we're talking about, anti-fragility. When other people are getting, it's getting crazy and the crowd's getting on you, you don't just keep doing the same thing. You ratchet it up to another level, which is precisely your example. You don't just, I don't just stay where I am. I don't just get back up. I get stronger each time.
Yeah. See, I kind of thought about this the other day, and I had another distinction. We've been trained, think about the management school. We've been trained to develop convergent thinking, whatever it is. Take all of these things, and you have to distill it down, because there's only one right answer. You got to go find it.
Yeah.
Anti-fragility is divergent thinking. It's the exact opposite. It's saying, you know what, things didn't work. Now think about 27 different ways of doing it. And some people go, oh my gosh, I've been told to do convergent thinking, and this is divergent thinking.
Yeah.
And they immediately panic, and it's like the end of the world.
Yeah.
In your travels, when did you discover anti-fragility, and when did you make the connection between anti-fragility and entrepreneurship?
I've been talking about it. You heard me talk about it before COVID, but during COVID, it became crystal clear that this was the essence of entrepreneurship. Because the world is going to continue to move faster and faster. It has got all our life, and it's not ever going to get slower. And so if it's not ever going to get slower, that means there's going to be more uncertainty. That means there's going to be more adversity. That means so anti-fragility isn't just a nice thing to have. It's going to be a trait that's a Darwinian trait that allow you to survive. And that to me is entrepreneurship. Okay. And if we can't tie ourselves to that, we're not teaching the right type of thing.
Let me ask you one very fundamental thing, maybe a bit of a challenge. If it's so important, why the heck aren't schools teaching anti-fragility to entrepreneurs? Entrepreneurs are being taught how to create great decks, business plan, market sizing, TAM, etc., all of which are important. But if the person is incapable of developing an anti-fragile mindset and behaving in an anti-fragile manner, all of that is for naught.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I wouldn't say that doing these other things you said are those things are against anti-fragility.
No, I'm not saying they're against. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that
it's by themselves they're not sufficient. Right?
Correct.
And to me, anti-fragility comes down to a mindset, skill set, and a way of operating. And the skill set involves some of those things you've talked about. But are we appropriately spending time on the mindset? And the answer, I believe, is no. But there are a lot of places that are, and kudos to those who are. But the other thing is a way of operating. And this is something that I feel like people aren't onto yet, is that we have been trained, and you and I have been trained in this from a very early ages: command, control, conquer. That's how you win. That's how you win. Command, control, conquer. But Howard Stevenson at Harvard once defined entrepreneurship as the pursuit of opportunities with resources beyond your control. What do you mean beyond my control? That's not command, control, conquer, right? Yeah. And that is precisely what makes you anti-fragile, right? Yeah. How do I not just have the mindset to want to excel, not just have the skill sets of doing this, the planning and the market addressability and demographic, psychographic analysis, all these types of things, but how do I then get it done? How do I get those resources? I don't think you can have anti-fragility without having a distributed way of operating. And we talk about the way we teach it. What are our 4 pillars? Our 4 pillars, to make it easy, are 4 H's. It's the heart. You have to start with the heart. I got to be willing. I got to want to be anti-fragile. I got to want to be an entrepreneur because it's a tough journey. So I go from the heart. That's where you got to start, because if you don't want to do it, if you're not willing to go in that, then I go to the head. All right, I'm willing to go to battle to be entrepreneur. I'm willing to make it to be anti-fragile. How do I do that? Give me the knowledge. That's the head. Once I have the knowledge does not get the job done. You need to know what to do. The hand gets the job done. So then we go from the heart, the head, to the hand. And now I have the willingness to do it. Now I have the skill set to do it, the knowledge to do it. Now I'm willing to run into battle, but I got to have the pack to run with. And that's the last H, which is home. And how do you build that? And if you have those 4 H's, I would argue, Ram, that you're going to have an anti-fragile person. Let me just give you an example of that. When COVID happened, we were sitting there, and our students were all unmoored. They just did not know what to do. They had thought that everything was fine. It was December. They had their jobs lined up. They were going to go to that. They were going to go to spring break in March. All was going to be good. And Bernie Sanders was going to be president. In March, it just all came back. COVID, everything just blew out. And their jobs were gone. They were in their basement of their parents. They weren't going to spring break in Florida. It was just all gone. And what do we do then? And we could have sat there and I could have talked to them about how do you do this. But what I was able to do was to recruit people like Jocko Willing, people like John Calipari, the coach of Kentucky, people like Deval Patrick, Billy Campbell, all these people. Why? I didn't have the resources, but I said, I need this. I have social capital with you. I need you to be part of our series to help build anti-fragility. And by getting these resources and assembling them quickly, I was able to do that. I couldn't have just got these speakers. I could have just gotten the speakers, but why it was anti-fragile? Because we got motivated to do it, our team. We couldn't do it ourselves. We said, how do we do this? But we built a curriculum. We went, how do we do this? How do we get the right people? And all the 4 H's coming together is what created this enormous positive event out of a terrible, terrible thing.
Yeah, I think that series was an excellent idea. Excellent idea. Excellent idea. See, I took many of these things that, I came at these, in parallel, okay, over the last 10 months. Yeah. So I told you about this, I put together a 2-day workshop, okay, where we teach people the elements of anti-fragility. There are many pieces to it, but at the end of it, I don't just give you the knowledge, but we do it in 3 parts. I talked to Sanjay Sharma, about teaching methods, okay? And then second thing is, we help you go and find some aspect of your life or business or entrepreneurial venture that you can apply to right away. 3, we use the BJ Fogg method for developing a little tiny habits plan, and you execute on step 1 of it right there. Yeah. But here is the best part of it. After that, this is something that completely came out of the blue. We found there's what's called the forgetting curve. You forget 90% of what you learn within 1 week. Right? The Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. Yeah. So I took this, I created groups of 5 people, and said you will meet for 5 weeks after the workshop, and each 90-day session, 90-minute session that you have every week, you will have to discuss 1/5 of what you studied at the workshop. So 1/5 times 5, I make you revise over 5 weeks. And then keep them together, and they become the community who will support, help them to brainstorm and hold each other accountable.
Yes, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. And that gets to the power of habits. Another great book by Charles Duhigg.
Yeah.
And Sanjay Sarma, the book Grasp, is about how people learn and the physiology of it.
Yeah.
I love it. That's why, that's a scientific approach. That's the MIT way. It's almost like you're from MIT, Ron. What do you I don't think you can have anti-fragility without having a distributed way of operating. And we talk about the way we teach it. What are our 4 pillars? Our 4 pillars, to make it easy, are 4 H's. It's the heart. You have to start with the heart. I got to be willing. I got to want to be anti-fragile. I got to want to be an entrepreneur because it's a tough journey. So I go from the heart. That's where you got to start, because if you don't want to do it, if you're not willing to go on that, then I go to the head. All right, I'm willing to go to battle to be entrepreneur. I'm willing to make it to be anti-fragile. How do I do that? Give me the knowledge. That's the head. Once I have the knowledge does not get the job done. You need to know what to do. The hand gets the job done. So then we go from the heart, the head, to the hand. Mm-hmm. Now I have the willingness to do it. Now I have the skill set to do it, the knowledge to do it. Now I'm willing to run into battle, but I got to have the pack to run with. And that's the last H, which is home. And how do you build that? And if you have those 4 H's, I would argue, Ram, that you're going to have an anti-fragile person.
There are 2 essential elements I found to be successful at doing that. One is sense making.
Yes.
There will be a lot of signals, ambiguous, unambiguous, weak, strong, as opposed to saying, Bill, stand up, Bill, sit down. That's the old way. Yes. Now you need to look at the signals and then figure out which one is important, which one is not, and how you integrate them. And then 2, you may not have already done what needs to be done, and you need to improvise.
Yes.
So for example, what I'm doing is I've put together a little, if you will, a workshop, a masterclass, okay, where I have an FBI agent come and help people think about how to figure out what's important in a situation, because their life depends on it. She's done this for a living for the last 30 years.
Yes.
And then 2, I have somebody who runs an improv theater come and talk to people about how to improvise.
Yes, that is so important.
Yeah.
We do it exactly the same thing. We have Jocko Willink Jocko Willink, who did the extreme ownership. He trained Navy SEALs. He's the one who took back Ramadi. Mm-hmm. Number 1 times New York bestseller. His podcast is $1 million. Talk about how do you make decisions in the middle of a gunfight.
Yes. Yes.
And these are literally life or death decisions. But what's the thought process you go through to do that, right? And so that involves a lot of sense making. Props to our friends Deborah Ancona and Peter.
Yes. I think she's written a paper on that as well.
Many a paper.
Yeah.
And Nelson Rapending at the Leadership Center talking about the importance of sense making. Exactly what you're talking about. How do we train entrepreneurs? We train them in improv. Why improv? Because improv is so important. That life is improv. But as you go up on a stage, you're there and there's no place to hide. You might try this over here, and if it doesn't work, what do? Do you put your head down and cry? Do you say, I can't do this? No, you have to come back, and here we come back over here. And so I couldn't agree with you more, Ron. First of all, that's sense making. And then I would add decision making, knowing that it's imperfect because your sense making isn't. And then improvising to try this, come back, try this. Okay, that works. Now let's stay with it. Great skills for not just entrepreneurs in startups, but entrepreneurs throughout society. And I believe entrepreneurs need to be ubiquitous in society. not just in startups. They need to be in big companies. They need to be in academic institutions. They need to be in government. That's what we're going to need to solve these challenging problems. When someone comes up to me and says, I'm a founder of 14 companies, I'm like, well, that means you're not a great entrepreneur, because that's the fact that you've had. Look, it's very, very hard to create a scalable, great company. And it takes years to do that. And I think this is one of the challenges that today is everything's moving so fast that people think I only need to work at a company for 4 years, and then I'm going to flip it. It's a long time to build a great, iconic company. One of my students, Freddie Karras, this is, he started a company called Okta. It's like a 12-year overnight success. It's one of the great success stories of our time. It's, I think, a $40 billion company now. But he had to think long term. He had to be committed. One of the great basketball minds of all time is Red Auerbach. His teams won, in 13 years, they won 11 championships. People are always saying, well, what's the key, Red? What's the key? What is your offense? Tell us, what's the key? He said, a year is not a long time. He said, but what's the key? A year is not a long time. But I don't get it. Is this some sort of Zen thing? No, a year is not a long time. I think long term, and other people are thinking short term. Long term, and I say a year is not a long time. I will eventually win, and I'll win on a sustained basis. But if you're constantly reacting to other things, not thinking long term, you will not.
No. See, I think you hit the nail on the head there. People who are repeatedly successful have that anti-fragile mindset, have the ability to build and leverage communities, and so much more on top of that.
Yes.
When they lack that foundation, they don't grow, and their enterprises don't grow.
Yes. And you have to be anti-fragile. You have to have those 4 H's, and you have to think long term. And when you think about those people, when John McCain, why did the POWs, why did John McCain last and some of the other POWs in Vietnam didn't? They were unwilling to think long term.
Absolutely.
How do you build a community so that when I see that there's an opportunity, I have a community of people who will immediately help me to do things?
Correct.
Realize that opportunity without having to pay them, without having to spend the time to get them up to speed. That I say, here's something, I think that I need supply chain help going to China to get this done. Let me call Yossi Sheffi. I need something to get, how do I do pricing? I'll speak to Roberto Rigaban. And that is essential, this idea of how do you build a community. And this is something that I don't have my head around completely how to do at all. But how do you build communities? How do you curate communities? How do you then, keep them vibrant? Because a community is not a commune. A community means I give to it and I get from it. See, because if it's not how many people you're linked to, how many connections you have on LinkedIn. It's if I call up Ram and Ram says, Bill is a member of the community, let me help him. Because someday I want something from him. And that people say, well, that's you're not just, yes, I have paid it forward enough to have social equity to do that. But this distributed way of operating, is hard to understand, and it's hard to teach people. And what do I want? I want to teach people how to do those things. TAM, business plan, personas, cost of customer acquisition, LTV. I wanted to, you need that. But that's so much easier than teaching people how do you build these communities? How do you become a good member? How do you curate and cull your community to make sure that you have a high-performing one? And how do you create that mindset? Those are much harder things.
About 3 or 4 years ago, I developed, the business thinking as a sequence of steps, okay? And I laid it out in a 4x4 matrix, meaning 16 cells, okay? And there, you remember that old board game called Snakes and Ladders?
Yes, yes, exactly.
Okay, so I set it up as a snake and ladder game. Okay, it's structured that way. So in other words, you can learn something and then you can jump to another point higher up in the matrix. But then if you learn something new, you need to drop down, like you've been bitten by a snake, and you need to redo something.
Yeah.
So as long as you live on that 4x4 matrix, 16 cells, the more you iterate, the better you become at business thinking, which is very simply maximize the value you provide and maximize what you get in return.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Isn't that the wonderful thing for the entire world? Because it raises the standard of living for the provider and the receiver.
Yes. By the way, in the United States, we call it chutes and ladders.
Yes.
In England, they call it snakes and ladders. And that's exactly the same kind of approach that we apply as well. So great minds think alike. Yes, that's what you have to do.
Most people think it's only the people who are business people, businessmen, businesswomen. And I tell people, anytime you exchange value, I do something of value for you and you do something of value in return for me, that's the definition of a business. Absolutely. The fact that you may pay me in dollars, or you know what, Ram did this for me, I'm going to do something for him, or Ram did this, I'm going to do something in return as a barter, etc. There are 6 different ways you can do that. Is not, but everybody is in business, but for some reason people don't think about it that way.
Yeah.
And there's a negative stigma. Oh, Bill, you're in business? Oh my gosh, you must be gouging people and pillaging people. Like, everybody is in business.
That's right. We live in a society where you exchange goods.
Yeah.
So I agree. I violently agree with what you said.
Thank you for listening to the iAchiever Expert Series with your host, Ram Iyer. We'll bring you thought-provoking and practical conversations to help you become better, smarter, and more successful, helping you achieve your personal greatness. All from the perch of Ram Iyer, the thought leader, author, keynote speaker, workshop leader, and mentor.